You got into the safety business because you wanted to protect people, but somewhere along the way, the job started controlling your time, your schedule, your priorities, even your income potential. What if the expertise you've built over the years in the field can give you something more? More freedom, more control, more ownership of your future. I'm Sheldon Primus, the author of 7 Steps to Starting a Profitable Safety Consulting Business and the host of the Safety Consultant Podcast, with more than 350 episodes helping safety professionals become consultants and grow their career. Consulting changed my life. In fact, I'm a full-time RVer, and one consulting contract paid for my home I live in today. Now, I help safety professionals build their own consulting practice through bi-weekly coaching calls, accountability, and personal guidance. But this program isn't for everyone. Start with the Consultant Readiness Audit at sheldon.coach.
What if everything we thought we knew about safety was just interference? From the host of the Rated R Safety Show and the founder of Safety FM comes the complete Signal Transmission Trilogy, now available in one powerful edition. Safety, in my opinion, the book that started the conversation. Safety Mutation, where the boundaries of culture, systems, and belief begin to break. And now, Safety Transmission, the final piece of the signal. For the first time, all 3 books are together in one volume. The Signal Transmission Trilogy, Complete Edition. This isn't just about compliance. It's about consciousness. It's about decoding the way we think, lead, and live, inside and outside the system. Whether you've been following the signal since the beginning or you're just now tuning in, this is the version to own. Search Signal Trilogy on Amazon or visit safetyfm.com to get your copy now.
This is Andy.
And this is Matt.
And you're listening to
The Hot Podcast with no name.
What a dumb name.
It's so stupid. We are starting episode 70, the big 70. I have no example of what anniversary that would be.
What is it? Anniversary?
No, I will look it up though. While you do the intro for the episode. That sounds good. Go ahead. Go.
Yeah, so we have a topic, and our topic has to do with what we've been seeing recently during training specifically. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got for an intro, Matt. Was that good? Did I nail it?
You nailed it. And I was able to learn that it is the platinum anniversary.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
I would say congratulations, but I'm not going to.
All right, can you do a proper intro for this episode while you're...
Yes. A little peek behind the curtain. When we are in training, we have a slide deck of, I'm guessing at this point, over 300 slides. And during every session, during a break, you will come over and you'll be like, I have an idea for a slide, and you'll make a slide. So that's how we got to 300 slides, because we probably show about, over a full day, maybe 40 slides.
Maybe. That would be a lot. That'd be a very slide heavy day if there was 40
slides over 6 to 8 hours. So it's a very few relative slides. But you'll make one every time and get really excited about it.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, you told me that people need visuals, because when you started to train with me, I would be on the same slide for 3 hours.
And it was just the intro with your name on it. And that was it.
It's just my name.
And so you made a slide a couple months ago because we'd kind of been hearing this reoccurring theme. And it was, do you remember the exact phrase that you used?
No, but it was something like, we can't not define a problem, just because we don't have a solution yet.
Yes,
Something
which is
like
wow.
with better wording.
No, honestly, maybe not. With your slides, most of my
Maybe not,
job
maybe
is
not.
just cleaning them up. But it was the idea that we can't be afraid to define a problem as a problem just because we don't know a solution.
Yeah.
And we hear that often, and we hear it in a lot of ways. We've heard it as sometimes we heard someone say to us in a training, sometimes I use disciplinary action even though I'm not sure that I should, because I don't want to have to address the system problem. Because I know once I look at the system problem in the face, it's going to be too much for me to deal with. So I just go back to the normal habit of disciplinary action to make sure people follow a rule. And it has evolved to what you had defined on that slide.
And I'd say that usually the words that people use when they describe that problem to us isn't exactly how you said it. I would say that's probably the words that we would use to describe it. But most of the time, we'll be having conversation and someone will just say something like, yeah, but you don't understand. They just have to do it right. Referring to a process or following a rule. And we said, no, okay, well, we understand. Tell us a little bit more. And they'll be like, what you don't understand. They can't make any mistakes. They can't make an error here. They can't. You don't understand. They just have to always do it right. And that's at which point in time we try to unpack why somebody aggressively has that stance, because it could have been less than 20 minutes before we would have all agreed that humanity is fallible, and we would have played games around error, and we would have had lots of conversation around the fact that nothing is ever perfect. And yet we get to a very specific example, and the answer is they have to be perfect. Yeah. Whoever does this has to be perfect 100% of the time. They always have to follow process. Process always has to be right. And it's just because it's a brittle part of the system, right? It's just because today, with the current process, the current understanding, the current technology available, there's nothing to protect anyone apart from always getting it right 100% of the time. But it's fascinating because in conversation, people stop themselves from being able to even articulate that that's true from, I think it's a fear of not knowing what to do about it if you say it out loud, meaning no one has a mental model yet of how to make the system less brittle. How do we fail safely in that circumstance? No one's seen it's possible yet, in terms of, the folks that are in the room or the people who are having that conversation. And it is amazing that because we can't picture how to solve it, much of the time we can't even articulate that there's a problem or that it is brittle or that we should be trying to find better ways to address it and make it a more resilient process. People just, we can't even get that far in conversation until we try really hard and back it up and give more examples and come back to it 5, 6, or 7 times in a day to try to see if we can get to a place where people can actually articulate the problem statement that, yeah, in this circumstance, it is such a brittle process that if you do get it wrong, terrible things happen. And that's a problem, period.
Yeah, I find it to be part of the brain that's maybe slowest to accept this when the consequence feels so high.
Sure.
It's like, hey, yeah, when we're talking about error, it's like, it's normal. We recognize it as like a lapse in a mental lapse, and we can't predict it, and it's going to happen. It's part of being human. And everyone's like, yep, that's absolutely true. We know that to be true. It's part of being human.
Here's 100.5 examples from our personal life in which we accept it's true, and we'll give you more, and we believe it to be true, and we know it's true. And then,
except over there, you can't do it over there. You can't be
over in this area.
Can't be
not
human
true.
over there.
Can't be true.
Yeah, it's. I would say it's very common. I don't want to say universal because we've been places that maybe they've already wrestled with it, or maybe that's just how they were raised or how they all grew up. But it is very common that it is a struggle to get there, to get to a place where you can admit that even in an area that has high consequence, people can still just have lapses or misses.
Yeah. And I think it came up because in this past week, not only did we have that slide up on the screen for a good chunk of the time we were there one of the days, but there was a specific example that was brought up. And a lot of the stories that you and I will tell are ones that intentionally allow people to wrestle with the idea of a person either having a slip trip or a lapse or intentionally not following process because they have competing priorities in a way that our hope, right? And this goes back to the last episode, right? Our hope is that they can apply those stories to their own world when there's enough parallels, and see a place for creating a less brittle system, for creating the ability to fail safely in some piece of this puzzle, or even just reducing the number of error traps that exist, or making the process itself a little bit easier for somebody to get right if they're brand new and they haven't had 150 different ways of seeing the process go well or not go well. Anything to make it a little bit better, make the process just a little bit better. That's why we tell the stories. And in the room, kind of at the beginning of the day, someone had given us a very, very parallel story to the one that we were telling, like in their own worlds. It was so similar.
I mean, I can explain it. I can explain it. Yeah. You know, someone says, hey, this is apples to apples, or this is apples to oranges.
Yeah.
This was a Macintosh apple from New England to a Macintosh apple from New England type of comparison. It was identical. I mean, same tree maybe these apples came from, in the same place.
Yeah. And it was a great example. And I was so excited because I was like, okay, so we can give them our example to work through, and it can be messy because they're not invested in it personally because it's not from their world. And then once we wrestle through our example, then we have this other example that is exactly, it's probably from the same branch. Those apples grew up next to each other. It is so similar. It's scary. And we went through our example and they were all on board, and their statement was, yeah, we would absolutely be learning. We would never think that this was a person problem. It's clearly a system problem, and we clearly need to address the system, because if we don't make this easier to do, other people who are trying to conserve energy, they're absolutely going to do the same thing. We would all do the same thing as this operator. This makes sense. And this is how we do business here already. We always learn and improve in circumstances like this. And then you and I looked at each other and we said, okay, great. So let's go back to the example that you gave us.
Well, let's wait a minute here. That's exactly what the sentiment in the room was like, what? No,
this is different. It's different.
Our example is different. A little similar, but this is way different.
This is way different. And then there was an amazing split in the room. You just watched, the people's different thought process, like fracture the middle of the room, of a bunch of people being like, I think it's exactly the same. And then a whole other group of people being like, no, you don't understand. It's completely different. So we spent a long time trying to figure out why the sentiment was that it was different, because objectively, really similar circumstances. Subjectively, clearly not, so much so that people were switching position in the middle of the discussion as to what side of the fence they were on, as to whether or not it was similar. And where we got to was similar to where we've gotten other times. Of at the time the event happened, people believed on the surface it was a person problem. Somebody wasn't following process. In this case, they weren't tying in when they were supposed to tie in. Then in learning about the process, there was an understanding that, well, there's really no good place for people to actually tie in. And the process that we have in place right now is arduous and doesn't make sense to have 100% tie off. And no one's following it currently. And even though the ramifications of following is your life, most likely, it's not making sense for people to do the tie-off process as designed. And then they tried really, 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 really hard to fix the problem.
And this is where they deserve a ton of credit. So much credit.
So hard, right? Just so many. They tried so hard, so many iterations of re-engineering all of the tie-off places, of being able to create a completely different mechanism to do the work itself so that you didn't have to follow this arduous process. And through the different iterations they taught us that they never came up with something satisfactory. And so ultimately, the only thing that changed, as far as, you know, folks in the room were aware of, is that they hired a different group of people to do the work.
Who are maybe more familiar with that style of work.
Correct. Who have more experience doing that style of work. And they reiterated that you have to follow this really, really arduous process. And they had people whose job was to stand there and basically watch to make sure that people were following the process. Yeah. And then we were curious as to what the current state was. Like, okay, so did it work, right? Like, do we have 100% tie off still? Is that what's happening? Is there what is current state? And at least the folks in the room were not aware as to what the current state was, which is fine.
We were.
But we were.
We had a pretty good idea of what current state was.
And you know, when we pushed them on a little bit, like, has anything changed? This whole process that everyone was able to articulate that, okay, no one would follow it as written. And they described it to us. And it was one of the most arduous 100% tie-off processes I think I've heard of. And we've seen people not do it for far lesser energy saving reasons than the ones that we saw and the ones that we heard about. And the thought process at the time was just, but you don't understand. They just have to do it. It's different from the example you gave, Andy and Matt, because in the example you gave, you guys came up with a solution that made the process less arduous. And we don't have that solution. And so it's different.
And so people just need to, they did not say this, but I'll say what I heard. People just need to be perfect. They just need to be perfect.
They just need to be perfect, because if they're not, and they either intentionally decide not to follow this arduous process, or in doing it, they make an error, then they fall to their death. So they have to. And that's where we spent a long time being like, well, who's still looking at coming up with a better solution to it? Like, this happened, you know, many years ago already. I think it was something like 6 or 7 years ago that this bad event happened that brought to light that this was such an arduous process, et cetera, et cetera. And that's when we learned that after sort of the investigation closed and they couldn't come up with a better answer at that point in time, like most investigations, like the ones in the world that I came from as well, it's just, that's it. That's the answer. The answer is, we're going to do it the same way, except you got to do it really well. Otherwise bad things happen, which we now know because this really bad event happened. Period.
That's it.
And it's 7 years later, right?
That's it.
So
we're not ignorant to the fact there's always mounting pressure to move on, just because something else is happening or has happened, and you have limited resources, and you have to find out you have to solve the next problem, or try to solve the next problem. And that's just what reality is like. And it unfortunately sort of felt complete. It felt like, well, we did everything we could to try to solve it. As much resources as we could put into it, we did. And the answer was, you just got to follow the rule. That's that. And we close this book and move on to the next one. Not we earmark this chapter and come back to it in a set schedule of 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. It was just done.
Yeah. And in the world and the words that we might use is, they found a really, really brittle part of their process. They couldn't figure out at the time how to make it less brittle, but because no one really had a good answer, we just said, I guess we're done with this brittle part of our process, and it's going to stay this way. Not outwardly, meaning nobody said that, right? Meaning no one was like, okay, this is good enough, and we're just going to move on. But because of the way that we see investigations, and the way we see we found something and now we have to address it, and this is going to be the fix or not the fix, the idea of having a problem statement that lives on because we haven't come up with a good solution to it yet. That's a very foreign concept to many places of we don't have a great solution. We have what we're doing right now, but we all objectively know it's not great. And we don't know what to do yet, but certainly we know we shouldn't give up on it. And so it should live somewhere. And maybe we crowdsource solution sets to it at some point. Maybe we have to form a committee to talk about it, or maybe we just have to revisit in 2 years because maybe technology will have changed at that point in time, or maybe the financial constraints will be different, or maybe something will change that allows us to have another degree of freedom in solving this problem. But we're not satisfied with our current solution. And I think emotionally that is difficult, I think even morally to do, which is why people argue with us so vehemently that this circumstance is different, is because morally we have to say it's good enough. Meaning whatever our solution is that we close the book on, that we say we tried X, Y, and Z, we tried these 5, 8 different ways to address the problem and we couldn't come up with a different way. If we can't convince ourselves that our current way is good enough, then morally it feels like we've done something wrong because we know people are still in danger and we don't have a solution for it. And for those that live in the space of leadership and safety, that is the most terrifying place to be as an individual who feels ultimately responsible for other people's safety.
I mean, that's 70 episodes in, and that might be one of your better points.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's probably only one of 2 or so, but it's definitely, I think it's one of the really important ones is that we as leaders, and you could take safety out of this because I know it was true for me as well, coming up with a new business plan, how we were going to achieve a goal that I thought maybe at the time I probably really struggled with, but I had to get on board with believing it was going to accomplish the goal we set. And then I had to present it and convince the team and convince myself that it was right. Mm-hmm. And I think this is that is hard. That is incredibly challenging and incredibly human to have to deal with every time we get in these situations where we don't know the better solution. We probably in our deepest thoughts know that this is not it. But what else is there?
Yeah.
And
if I admit,
and I can't say don't
that it's
do the
not
work.
Good enough. What'd you say, Matt?
I can't say don't do the work. Right? Like
Sure.
The show goes on. Obviously, that's within reason. We know there's exceptions to everything, and sometimes the show stops for a while until it's solved differently. But most of the time, we have this what we think is best solution, and we have to go with it. We have to believe that it works. We have to believe that people will recognize the risk of doing this work at this height, and they will tie off. And we have to reiterate that and try to make people watch them do it. And we believe that's solved.
And then we do formal risk assessment processes to put that feeling to a number, and then that feels good enough because it has to. I guess emotionally it has to feel good enough. And the only thing that prevents us from doing, I think, is keeping the problem alive. And that's really, really important, is to be able to keep. And we're not talking about every problem, right? We can't put 7 different iterations of something for every single defined problem that comes up, or everything that's, frustrating or arduous. But we're talking about things that have catastrophic failure, like life or death failure if it's gotten wrong. This is a category of problem we're talking about. It's really hard to keep that problem statement alive if we convince ourselves that our current state is good enough, even when we know it might not be. And I think that some organizations do a really, really good job keeping the problem statement alive, including the one we were at.
Yeah.
Not for this specific example, but there was another example that they gave us later on about a different process that they realized that they didn't have some good solutions to. And they created this corporate team that kept trying and coming up with different possible solutions and piloting it. And that stayed alive for a long time. And they were talking about, the good work that came out of that group. And in our mind, we're just like, well, okay, whatever that group is, whatever process you got to that team, just put the problem statement we've been talking about this arduous tie-off process, put that in that bucket. Wherever that bucket is, put that in that bucket so it stays alive. Because if it doesn't, no one would be surprised, unfortunately, if they got an alert that there had been a fatality and you said where the fatality was happening and what process somebody was doing. No one, at least in that room, would have been surprised that that's the next place it happened, because it was still brittle. Which is still brittle because the solution that people were using wasn't a solution people were actually using.
Yeah. And I think more than half the room knew that.
Correct. Yeah.
They knew that the solution that they put in place probably also wasn't being followed, which I think this for me was a big sell on changing my career and doing this HOP stuff, as we so lovingly describe it as, was because if everything was reactionary, I'd be like, this is just a really good way to do after action reviews. That's why I would have felt like it. But we're in a situation where if you're hearing this right now, you can pull up a prior event that hopefully wasn't your miss and nothing bad happened, but maybe that you made some change to, and you can review that right now. If that work is still happening, you can go and look at the efficacy of those systems that are in place and those changes that you made, and then you can say, we nailed it. Or you can say, oh, that solution I thought I put in, nope, that didn't do anything. It didn't change anything. And somewhere in between those two, you probably land. But you have the opportunity right now to go and learn about that. And guess what? You can make a change before something bad happens.
Yeah. Which is exactly what, I don't know how many times you or I said it to various people in various times in this last week of like, hey, so next time you're going to do any sort of operational learning, could we give you a suggestion on where you should go learn? You should go learn in this area about this process, because from what we've heard, you might be surprised or not surprised, I don't know, about what you find in terms of the efficacy of following that really arduous tie-off process. And so, we I don't know, at least half a dozen times to half a dozen different people suggested that be the next thing that people the next thing that people go learn about, which I have faith they will, because it was a really, really, really cool group of people that we were getting to talk to. So,
it really was.
And many of them in the room could see that these apples were from the same branch of the same tree, and that the only difference between them is one of them happened to be easier to solve than the other, but the potential consequence was equally as high. The arduousness and the reason why there was a problem was very parallel. We don't want to be afraid of keeping our problem defined or keeping our problem alive just because we don't yet know how to solve it. Period.
That's the episode.
That's it.
That's it. It boils down to one slide, which is a wild thing to say out loud. And now I'm wondering why we don't just, instead of a podcast, just post an image.
Just post one slide.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. A slide is worth a 28-minute podcast. So that's how it is. All right. Well, I think that's it. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon.
Well, that's it.
Yep. Another one in the books. We did it.
If you want to send us any of your thoughts, actually fling us any of your thoughts, you can do so at the website www.hoppodcast.com.
That's HOPPODCAST.com.
It's still such a stupid name.
It's such a stupid name. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening.
You got into the safety business because you wanted to protect people, but somewhere along the way, the job started controlling your time, your schedule, your priorities, even your income potential. What if the expertise you've built over the years in the field can give you something more? More freedom, more control, more ownership of your future. I'm Sheldon Primus, the author of 7 Steps to Starting a Profitable Safety Consulting Business and the host of the Safety Consultant Podcast, with more than 350 episodes helping safety professionals become consultants and grow their career. Consulting changed my life. In fact, I'm a full-time RVer, and one consulting contract paid for my home I live in today. Now, I help safety professionals build their own consulting practice through bi-weekly coaching calls, accountability, and personal guidance. But this program isn't for everyone. Start with the Consultant Readiness Audit at sheldon.coach.
What if everything we thought we knew about safety was just interference? From the host of the Rated R Safety Show and the founder of Safety FM comes the complete Signal Transmission Trilogy, now available in one powerful edition. Safety, in my opinion, the book that started the conversation. Safety Mutation, where the boundaries of culture, systems, and belief begin to break. And now, Safety Transmission, the final piece of the signal. For the first time, all 3 books are together in one volume. The Signal Transmission Trilogy, Complete Edition. This isn't just about compliance. It's about consciousness. It's about decoding the way we think, lead, and live, inside and outside the system. Whether you've been following the signal since the beginning or you're just now tuning in, this is the version to own. Search Signal Trilogy on Amazon or visit safetyfm.com to get your copy now.